My guest today is actually in the Grand Canyon of Israel, and I wanted to share his background with you all. And he's also a really good friend, launching a brand new, very innovative product. So we really wanted to share with you. So to those who are joining us live, thank you. And I'm sure many of you will be watching this on demand. So welcome. My guest today is Michael Dubrovsky, co-founder of Quantify and CFox. So Quantify actually provides at-home blood testing. And they also, if you use a wearable, they will also incorporate your wearable data to provide you even more insights paired with your test results. So with Quantify, you can track your inflammation, metabolic fitness, hormone and nutritional balance, cardiovascular health, activity, and sleep from home. I want to highlight inflammation here because there's not really a product somewhere else actually allow you to track your inflammation. So we're really excited to learn more about Quantify from Michael today.
Hey, how's it going? Just
Good.
trying to. Okay.
All right, show us your background because I just made an intro. I said we're doing impromptu because you're in the Grand Canyon of Israel.
Yeah. So it's like I'm not exactly. I'm like 10 minutes walk from it, so you can't see it, but it's like just in the desert here. So it's like very lot of rocks. Uh, spent like a day stacking rocks here recently.
This is probably one of the best like a backdrop ever, like on Instagram.
Yeah. Yeah, there's like a cell tower very close to here, so it's actually very good signal. That's why I thought it might be funny to just try it. Um, but it seems, how can you hear me and everything?
Yes, you're good.
Okay, awesome.
All right, let's get started. This is also Mike's first and Quantify's first Instagram live, so very excited.
Excited to try this.
All right, so tell us a little bit about your background and then how you became a co-founder, how you founded Quantify, CFox.
So, the story is about 2.5, 3 years ago. My co-founder Diedrich and I we basically started a company more around like a technology for photonic chips. So there's a whole world of chips, right? And everybody knows about the electronic chips, like the classic like CPU type chips. But there are also photonic chips. It's like a smaller subset, and they've been around for about 20 years. Um, Diedrich actually, his whole career has been in these chips. He did his PhD before there were any commercial products, and now the whole internet. So this phone call is going through. There's like a 50% chance that is going through one of the chips that he designed actually. So it's he's been like through the whole life of the industry over the last like 15 years. Myself, my background is originally in chemistry, and then I got really interested in silicon photonics, is what it's called, when I was at Technion in Israel a couple of years. This was like 5, 6 years ago. So we started the company, and very quickly we realized we could miniaturize a machine that's normally used in central labs for blood testing. And also there's like similar tools which are used for analyzing like protein-protein interactions. So it's usually used in research to develop drugs, like antibody drugs, for example. And so we started miniaturizing it. We basically were able to get down, us and the team we hired were able to get down to like a handheld form factor from a large tabletop. And this is common, like this is a trend in a lot of optics that's going on chip. So this is just another example of that. Um, Quantify comes in actually very recently. Quantify is a baby. So basically about 6 or 8 months ago, we decided that so the typical path for a medical device is you spend 5 years developing it, and then you kind of find out whether anyone will buy it. And we just, talking to a lot of people that have gone through this, we thought it would, if we can in any way get to the market faster and just emulate the product and see what the real like user experience is, even if it's not exactly the same thing, that would be ideal. So what we did is build out an emulation of what it would be like to have our device at home. So it uses a mail-in test. So you actually collect a card and mail it lab that uses standard equipment. Like, it's not our device, it's actually gold standard tools. And we do a panel of biomarkers across different, like, interesting kind of health axes, basically. So like metabolic fitness, inflammation, hormonal, and then we track all of that in like a nice, easy to understand view. And we actually also digest the data so that you don't have to look at the underlying biomarkers. You can look at a category like, how's my inflammation, versus actually looking at something like HSCRP or homocysteine or whatever it would be. So we basically built that out, and now we're just starting. We had 30 people using it for the last couple of months, and now we're just starting to make it available publicly. And we're kind of excited to see what the response will be and which markers people will be most interested in, because then we can use that information in our development to actually launch that as an at-home device. That's take the test, result right away rather than mailing it somewhere.
Yeah, this immediate at-home device would be so useful for many people, because I mean, for mailing marker, many people are mailing their tests, but even the mailing part can be a bit hassle for people. So the at-home one will be like, I think that's the Quantify Plus, right? We're gonna talk about it a little bit later.
Yes.
So, like, why do you think the world needs service like Quantify?
Yeah, I think basically there are well, Americans have chronic disease, so certainly this working of just follow this path kind of up your to the medical system. Very of 6 chance of chronic disease. You're that as a that's
It looks like your internet is a bit unstable. You might have to repeat it.
oh really? Oh, I was just
Okay, now
saying
it's
that
good. Now it's good.
this is good. Okay, I was just saying 60% of Americans have a chronic disease, and like 30%, I think, have 2 chronic diseases or more. So just outsourcing your health to like the standard process that exists today doesn't seem to work that well. I mean, it works well if you need a surgery, but it doesn't really work for things that are related to lifestyle or even something like supplements, vitamins, and so on. It's very much like right now, it's just like a guess that people take, and then they don't really know what the effect is, because before, like long before you get sick, your biomarkers change, but nobody's really measuring them regularly. Also,
All right. So we were talking about why the world needs this. You mentioned about prevention. You mentioned about biomarker we've been tracking. For even you go to a doctor's office, you usually just tracked once a year, but you see a lot of biomarker changes before disease actually happens. That's when I had a crash.
yeah, so basically, first of all, your biomarkers will be out of range long before you can feel it and long before you're actually sick enough where the doctor will take action. I mean, a good example of this is the cutoff for CRP. Like, if you have CRP is an inflammation marker. If it's above 3 milligrams per deciliter, that's considered like something's wrong. But actually, you want it as low as possible. It's very predictive of when you'll die. So 3 is very high. Like, you really want like 0.3, but the doctor will only, I mean, the average doctor, of course, there's a range of like what people do, but the official guideline is like once you get past 1 to 3, that's when they actually start getting worried. But in reality, you want it as low as possible, and there are a lot of ways to get it down. So, and it's typically indicative of something going on in your that you need to debug anyway. So that's an example of just one. The CRP is a big one. I don't know if you caught this. Maybe I got cut off, but I was just saying that some vary sufficiently that if you take the measurement once a year, you're only really going to see like a huge change, because the small changes, you need like multiple measurements to actually make a trend. Like, an example is testosterone. Testosterone, and I think this is also true of women's hormones even more so because they vary over a month. But testosterone varies even in the course of a day. So if you don't take the test, like what we do is we actually connect to your wearable. So like, for example, like an Aura ring. So we know when you woke up. So we can actually use that information to know like there's a curve of cortisol and testosterone that starts after you wake up, like your circadian, and we track from the time you woke up. Say, take this from measurement, we can really change time to time. The doctor, this, change in woke up and it changed posture by 30. So that information I'd use information only drop by half a percent. You will see this is real. You won't see that like fine and which is our fault. So that's the reason that it's nice, convenient, home and all often and actually link track. They style the real walk. Am I any from this? You see it first. It's very realized. Cat like he did this 30 and Albert when we correlate. Simple, there's strong connection between sleep and strong love, but it's and so people it related. So it's actually important for it to be personal. Like there's also a strong negative correlation between sleep and inflammation. So getting good sleep is correlated with having low inflammation, but it's also again not a correlation of one. It's like a correlation of zero point 0.5, which for for a population of many different ages and so on, that's a good correlation. But it doesn't mean that on your personal level
Oh,
it'll actually have an yeah, it'll have an effect, and that's why it helps to measure.
So it's also the key of having kind of longitudinal data, like you multiple data points for you. So to really understand your personal health and also actually to debug before the serious stuff happens. So you can debug it right away.
Yeah, actually, often your absolute number doesn't tell you that much because you're just within range, and it's like hard to know is this good or bad, and what does it mean for you. But if you have a trend, like your CRP is increasing over time, you need to really find out what's going on because your inflammation is increasing over time. So it might be if it's stable at a certain level, that might just be your level. Maybe you can try to get it down, but if it's increasing, there's definitely something wrong. So that and today, like the medical system just doesn't collect that type of information, and it's also kind of pre-medical. So in a way, you're not sick enough; they don't know what to do with you. So that's like, I mean, you can see that wealthy people seem to be aging better than regular people. Like, I mean, part of it might be plastic surgery, but they seem to be doing pretty well. I mean, we have like an 80-plus-year-old president. Tom Cruise is like still starring in his films as like a young, sexy man at 60. So there's definitely something going on in terms of like if you really get serious, if you get serious about your health, you can definitely maintain it longer. But that's not really available for the average person today. So from our perspective, that's kind of our overall is to there's this thing it will talk about share a screen, but basically expect America up versus dollars and time is we more money on health, like my prep. But I can see Toden starting to grow up and on an up and spends money. So a big to do push of a freaking grab to where you that's fundamental effort. Just with it's not just expanded health span, but it's how people feel. And even in the now, so it's not something you're doing for 20 years later. Like you actually feel better if you get these markers in range today. You'll get more energy. Typically, you'll sleep better and so on.
So your quality of life is a lot better if you actually take care of the small things and then track over time and then debug right away.
Yeah, that's what I'm even doing this ourselves. I mean, in many ways, when we started the company, we were engineers who never really. I mean, I've never looked at my blood tests before SciFox, like never in my life. I'm also I mean, I'm 31. My co-founder, who's in his late 30s, also just like we're both just never cared about it. But we started looking into it and realized that okay, actually optimizing these numbers makes a big difference in my life. So in many ways, we built Quantify, at least the first version. I mean, I'm sure it'll change over time, but the first version in many ways is we just built something we wanted to use. Like we wanted to know how our wearable data, like sleep, activity, the heart rate data, like heart rate variability and so on. We just wanted to know how it correlated to these markers, which basically predict, it's literally are correlated with your lifespan. Like they're pretty predictive of literally what, your actuarial table number of how long you'll live on average. So, yeah, and a lot of the people that did the alpha were actually able to improve their numbers on many things. Like, uh, a good example is like cholesterol. That's very labile. So people with bad, like a lot of LDL, or actually a better measure is ApoB. It's much more predictive of heart attack. A lot of people were able to improve that, the ones that were like way out of range on it, because it's very lifestyle dependent. And so it's actually kind of funny. When we started running that Quantify study, we took weekly tests. So Quantify right now, when you go buy it, it's a maximum of monthly testing, just because right now it's expensive for most people to do weekly. Eventually, when we have the at-home reader, the cost of doing the tests will be much lower. And so you can do it weekly or even more often. But because of the logistics of mailing and everything, it's just impossible to get the price down below like $100 per test. I mean, we think over time it might drop to like $50 per test, but that's still pretty high for a weekly test. But we were doing the tests weekly just to accelerate, kind of get more information. And I got COVID almost immediately after starting the program, and all of my biomarkers cratered. So it's like I unfortunately I can't show you the charts here, but I can actually share the link to like an anonymized version of a report that may or may not be mine. And basically, there's like a crater in everything, and then the rest of the study, I just worked back up to my original levels. And but by doing this, I had to like sleep more and all this other stuff. I actually was able to, like basically like everybody in our study, and like 90% of men or something in America, I had like, when we started, I had like out of range low testosterone from just signing all of my, from spending my whole life in a lab, basically just, in a brick space with no sun and everything. And so I had to like fight my way back up on all the other markers, which also incidentally got my testosterone into like the normal range. And I mean, really, it was like a quality of life improvement. I mean, I stopped doing all of the lifestyle things for a while, and it all to normal, but it was interesting to see. So anyway, it's my own personal experience was kind of special because I got COVID in the middle. So like my inflammation went up, and then I had to fight to get it back down and everything. Some people actually, after having COVID, if they get tested, will for a long time have high inflammations. In many ways, it's like very topical to start tracking this stuff, because you might be even like 6 months after having COVID, you can have high CRP. There's a lot of papers about this. So I had that experience basically.
So that's really interesting, because once we always say the more you know, then the better you can do. So with the information that you can actually act on it rather than not knowing that information, which is like really valuable.
Yeah, and it's difficult to deconvolute. Like if you just another interesting thing is if you just test one marker, or just like think about how you feel or just read about it or something. It's just such a complicated multidimensional system. Like it's very hard to deconvolute. Is it that your blood sugar is out of range and you're just feeling bad because you have like really high insulin resistance, or is that actually fine and it's really you feel bad because your circadian rhythm is broken, and you're waking up with very low cortisol. Like there's so many things going on that what we thought was like the wider the panel we can do and the more we can cover, the more likely we are to actually let people find the root cause or like what they can improve that actually makes a difference, and like focus marker completely. But once you know what's wrong, like for example, if you're really bad insulin resistance and your blood sugar is really high, kind of headed towards being diabetic, then you doing like a more focused approach, like what Levels does, for example, if you're familiar with them, it's like the continuous glucose monitor company. So they're amazing at like helping you optimize that marker. They've built a lot around that. So basically, once you know what's wrong, then doing like a focused approach to fix it, you don't necessarily need to get another service, but basically like drilling down into it is important. But it's like from our perspective, just actually doing regular testing and tracking all these systems allows you to, first of all, catch things much earlier, and second of all, actually be sure, like, yeah, this is really what's wrong because I'm seeing everything else is fine. That's kind of how we look at it. And also having the wearable data is really important, because then you can see like, okay, it's recommended to sleep more. Is that actually working for me? Am I even maybe I'm already getting enough sleep? Like it's kind of not having all of that in one place still leaves open like a large chance of being wrong. So I mean, for us as scientists, we just, thought that this is how we would want to run the experiment, basically.
Absolutely.
And so to get serious about it and actually make a difference. Yeah. So, and it seems to a large extent that it actually is possible to get a lot of value out of it. Although again, it's still a baby. So we've been running it for 3 months. So for each shirt, it'll be different. But that's how it's been so far.
Right. I think the wearable data will actually give you a lot of context about this person's life, right? So then you can actually use the wearable data to decipher the context, and then people can think about where they can make the changes, which is very valuable.
Yeah, we also are working on making more complex recommendations. So, for example, we're planning to start recommending people to go and take follow-up tests. Like basically, for example, if your hormones are out of range, actually recommend like, okay, here are the possible things that are going wrong. And if, do your own debugging. So like, actually, I mean, your test is a perfect example. It's like, if you know your hormones are out of range, it's a good idea to take the million marker test because it might just be caused by something you're ingesting. And so that's not going to be fixed completely by lifestyle. So that we're working on building up a whole recommendation engine. It's already running, but we do more like basic recommendations right now, but we're going to add recommendations for actual products you can try or like something more complex, like protocols you can implement.
Awesome. So how does the process work right now? Walk us through the
Um,
user journey.
You sign website and you send test kit, if you've ever an at-home test, that's goal block, some like blood collection tools inside, and then you connect your wearable simultaneously. So we start pulling all the data from the API of your wearable, and we connect to everything besides the Apple Watch, basically. And the reason we don't connect to the Apple Watch yet is that you have to have an app in the Apple App Store. So we're on our way there, but everything right now is in browser, so we don't connect to the Apple Watch. And then one thing that we worked on a lot is, blood collection can be pretty painful. And so we're moving over time to like an arm collector, but labs aren't really there's not a lot of markers available for the arm collectors right now in the like gold standard labs. And we wanted to do a broad panel, so we weren't able to start with the arm collector. But what we did is we found adjustable lancets. So this is the thing that like at-home testing companies don't like to talk about because it's like, people, I mean, if you really explain what it is, people might not buy the product, but I'm just going to be open about it. So basically, especially the first time you prick your finger, it's like very scary. You have to put the thing to your finger and hurt yourself and so on. So what we did is we ourselves had to get over this. So we practiced a lot and kind of figured it out. I mean, I was very afraid of it at first. It becomes really easy once you've done it a few times. We found adjustable lancets. So there's a little thing you can turn on the lancet to set it to a very, very low setting. So like you can't feel it at all. And so for some people, their skin is very thin. That's actually, that's enough. And those are the people that have the worst experience with the typical at-home test. Because what the typical at-home test is, they're like, they want to get it right. So they give you like the hatchet, like the huge lancet, and you basically have to prick yourself with this. If you're like a weightlifter and you have a lot of calluses, that's going to work for you, right? But it's basically optimized for that person, because if that person can't get their blood out, then the test is failing a lot. But what we do is we actually have multiple adjustable lancets in the kit. Start with small, and it for you that's the level you use, and then go up YouTube until at the right where you can collect blood, but it's painful. And this difference, but it's big difference because we want people to be taking the. That's something we put a lot of work into, and we did a lot of testing of different lancets. Like we bought every single lancet on the market, basically. We also run a webinar every week where one of the guys helping us run the Quantify program, his name is Pavel. He's actually an MD, and he used to teach phlebotomy. So he taught blood collection. So he does this webinar every week where if people are afraid to prick their finger or whatever, they can join the webinar and he kind of walks them through it. And it's significantly less painful if you do it correctly. Like it's totally realistic, but because normally they just kind of send you a kit with a really big lancet, they just like throw you off in the deep end. For some people, it can really suck. Yeah. So that's something we put a lot of work into, and I think we have some, compared to other options, we really have something that's better from that perspective. Like we worked out something that's doable. I think in the future an arm collector will completely remove that problem, but for now that's, you know, the best we can do, but I think it's actually pretty reasonable. Like we took the test every week happily without any issues.
All right. So then once you prick your finger, you generate like a drop of blood, putting a absorbent paper, you send back the blood spot, right? And then you guys analyze it in a clear certified lab. Then you provide the results back.
Yeah, so basically it's a card that actually separates your blood cells from your serum. So the it's kind of fun, you know, if you're into things like this, it's it's like a little complex device made of paper. So you put your blood on it, and the blood cells move slower because they're large than the rest of the fluid. So it allows you to separate the blood cells from the serum or the plasma, and that actually makes it last a long time. So then you can ship it with USPS. It's very convenient. So you put it into this little bag that comes with it that has like a desiccant so it stays dry, and you just hang it outside your, like in your mailbox, and the USPS just picks it up. So it's actually having that's pretty new technology. Like it wasn't around 5 years ago, I think. Or it wasn't commonly used. Like labs didn't know how to work with it. So that also enables you to do more markers, also to sample well. You get like system. We actually a bunch of tests work blood to really collect blood both. Uh, there was quite so first these little they do their thing in our we show falls on our this type of collection is more and it's like help if that is safe during every happening. What used to happen is you would send a small tube in, but it's all liquid. So if it sits somewhere hot for a couple of days, it's kind of risky.
Right.
So that's how it works. And then you get your results within about 5 days. You get a report. So we'll email you and say, "Hey, your results are ready." And it's up in a view that actually juxtaposes your last week of wearable data against the day that you took the test. So basically what that allows you to do is see, okay, like versus the previous time that I took the test, how did my activity, like my actual behavior, like sleep, you know, we don't know what you did, right? So maybe you drank a lot of alcohol and your resting heart rate was up for most of the week. We don't actually know what the causes are, but we can see the results using the wearable. So you can actually correlate your behavior to biomarkers.
So what now tell us the panel. We talked about how the tests work, and then so tell us the different panels, because I know you have multiple tiers, multiple panels, and then you have one panel for men and then panel for women. Tell us about it.
Yes. So the fundamental panel is pretty similar between men and women. These are mainly hormonal, but basically we try to cover 4 categories of blood biomarkers. So inflammation, fitness, so that's really like glucose related. And then we call it balance. It's kind of a combination of nutrition and hormones. And in my opinion, balance is kind of like this. It's just like you don't really feel right, right? And actually, I think Eastern medicine does a much better job of this than Western medicine because they have concepts that are kind of like they don't really know what's inside, but I think they're hitting the nail on the head. You know, with concepts like chi, for example, it's like you just don't feel you don't have a specific. You're not bleeding or something, but you just feel bad, and you need to like it's a systemic issue. So we try to cover that in with markers that are more related to like, for example, ferritin is one. So ferritin is interesting because if you have low ferritin, it's related to like anemia, so you're not getting enough iron. For example, sometimes vegans don't get enough iron, or women will have low ferritin for different reasons. My wife had this issue when she was pregnant, and nobody tested her for this, so she felt terrible for like 6 months of her pregnancy until she got tested for iron deficiency, and it turned out she was just super tired because there's not enough oxygen in her blood. Like there's not enough iron, like hemoglobin, to carry the oxygen. So we test ferritin. Ferritin is actually also interesting because if you have really high ferritin, it means you have inflammation because ferritin only ends up in the blood when a cell ruptures and some ferritin comes out. It's actually really supposed to be in your blood. So a normal level of ferritin is normal because your cells are breaking up once in a while. But if you have a high level of ferritin, it actually can mean that you have inflammation. Right. So it's a dual marker depending on where it is. So balance includes like cortisol. For men, it includes DHEA and testosterone. DHEA is like a precursor to testosterone and also estrogen. And then for women, we're still working out how to make this valuable. It's something we keep it like in the experimental section, but we test FSH and estradiol. But we still haven't. We're also working on adding the other typical hormones like progesterone and LH to the panel, but we haven't 100% figured out. We're still getting feedback like how to make it useful because it changes over the month. So it's something that we've had some users report that they would be interested in doing those hormones multiple times a month, once a year. So basically you just do a dense set of tests once a year. So maybe we would actually leave them out of the main panel and just do this 1 month period once a year where you can actually see the curve. The other option is to try to time the test to exactly the same day every month after the period. Anyway, this is something we're like honestly still figuring out because it's more complex. It's a much more complex test than the other markers. But the markers are there and you can interpret them yourselves. We just don't provide a lot of interpretation right now. And then we have cardiovascular risk. I should say in balance, we're also working on, it's not included yet, but we're adding folate, B12, and I think another B vitamin, so that those changed a lot. So it's not as like taking one test for those. I mean, people sell these tests, but it's like they can change day to day depending on what you ate.
Right.
But if it's low, it's important because then you at least know, okay, today it's low and I feel this way, so maybe I should supplement. And then in cardiovascular risk, really important, we ApoB for 20 years have been known to be better markers than the typical LDL, HDL cholesterol markers, but doctors and normal labs are not really like up to date. They know about this, but it just hasn't been implemented yet. And if you look at like, longevity, like Peter Attia is like a famous longevity doctor. He's at ApoB all the time. It's just much more predictive of your long-term chance of having like a cardiovascular event. A lot of Americans die, so it's really important. So optimizing your ApoB and ApoA1 is much better than LDL, HDL. We do both. So you can kind of, if you want to talk to your doctor, you can at least show them the LDL, HDL levels. But yeah, basically that's something that's difficult to get now. Like if you ask your doctor for an ApoB test, many of them will say no. So that's something that we provide that I think is really high value. And then we also we collect triglycerides, which allows us to do like a triglyceride HDL ratio for metabolic fitness, which is like a measure of insulin resistance. So we do fast HbA1c, which is like a weighted average of your glucose levels over the last 3 months, and then triglyceride to HDL ratio. We also do vitamin D, which is kind of like it fits into a lot of categories because low vitamin D can give you inflammation. It's like anti-inflammatory to have good vitamin D levels. It's also tends to like decrease your glucose control as well. So it actually affects metabolic and inflammation. And we have vitamin D in both of those categories, like in the actual score you get for inflammation. So those are the 4 categories, and it kind of covers a lot of what people care about. I mean, there's more tests you can take, but it's really like a pretty comprehensive panel.
This is awesome. So then we talked about the process, we talked about all the panels. Now let's talk about the report. So the report not only gets
Wait, I should just 1 second. I should just be completely clear. There's really one panel, and it just has 2 variations in the hormones for men and women, but it's the same panel for everyone. It includes all of these markers, and you get it every time. So there's no like, you don't have to a la carte, like say, I want the inflammation marker. It just all comes in one shot.
Okay, that's good to know. So now the report. As the report, not only it's interactive, but you guys also came up with a score to help people really understand different categories of biomarkers in the report. So tell us about the interactive part, and then tell us about how did you come up with all the scores?
So it's basically an app. Run it up on your phone, in on website on your PC. Shows your data. It's screen like standard kind of way that biomarkers work. Two station or because very on those range pretty wide. So they're not that useful if you're getting serious about being healthy. So we give the standard range, and then we give kind of like a good range, like you really want to be here. And so you can see your data in like a historical curve. It's like displayed in a nice way where it's easy to grasp quickly. And then the biomarkers are kind of nested underneath these. We like to call them like axes of wellness. So you can imagine if you're mathematically inclined, you can imagine like an n-dimensional space where you have like the metabolic fitness dimension, the inflammation dimension, the hormonal balance dimension. And so we give you a score along each dimension out of 100%. And so, like 50% and below, something's wrong. Between 50 and 75, it's reasonable. And then you're really optimal if you're above that. And we give you 7 of those scores. So it's 4 blood biomarker scores, and then 3 for based on your wearable, like sleep activity and heart rate related markers.
That makes a lot of sense. So then I know you also have different tiers of the tests you offer. So tell us about the different tiers. What are the benefit for different tiers?
It's purely based on how often you take the test. So there's like an introductory tier, it's a yearly test. So you can just, if you haven't taken a test in a long time, like some people just haven't even been to the doctor since COVID started, our position is just take this test. At least you'll know if something is really out of range. And so that's the first tier. It's also, on a per test basis, it's the most expensive. And then there's a tier 2, which is a quarterly test, and that's really starting to get serious. Like, okay, you're actually measuring this more often than you would if you just saw a doctor once a year. And then there's the lowest per test to my tier 3, where you're measuring every month. And this will really speed back. In Ramat it's more digest data where you can actually do something. Can you do for a month? But if I mark, that's I think provides the most you, but we want it possible just to chart, and you are like screening rather than test.
That makes sense. So we mentioned a little bit before that Quantify Plus is coming in 2023. So tell us about Quantify Plus.
So, like I said, the bones of the company are building this miniaturized testing device. And actually, the next version of it, we're working on a wearable, like something that's similar to a continuous glucose monitor that will actually measure inflammation and hormones as well. But for now, it's like a small box. It's what we do. So Theranos was trying to do 1 drop of blood. I mean, let's just go straight to the thing, right? So Theranos was doing 1 drop of blood, theoretically, counting the blood cells, which requires one type of device, like it's something like a microscope. Then doing immunoassays, which is like proteins and hormones, and also doing blood chemistry, which is like fats and salts and so on. So all of these require different devices. So it was never really, it never even made sense how they would do this. But what we do is we're focused on one type of test, which is an immunoassay, which does proteins and hormones. And we make a chip that can do 15 at a time. That's our first version. And that covers about 30% of a typical blood test. And in Quantify, we actually focus mainly on those types of tests. And they tend to be the ones where making a lot of measurements is interesting, because if you look at like blood chemistry, typically your blood chemistry is okay. That's if you're really sick, like if you have kidney disease or something, your blood chemistry will be off. But it's the proteins and hormones that kind of are earlier markers. Of course, so it's actually kind of interesting. The system is over-determined in a way. So if you measure lots of metabolites, like small molecules, you can also get interesting data that way. There's a YC company that just launched called Iolo that's doing metabolite measurements. But it's very researchy, but you can look at a bunch of different small molecules in your blood and try to also figure out what's going on. But the proteins and hormones are more like ground truth information, at least the way we see it. And they're very well studied. So that's what we do with our device. And it dramatically cuts the cost, because you don't have to mail the blood anywhere. It also cuts the amount of blood you need. And it's like a small cartridge. It's more like a diabetic amount of blood, like a really small drop. You dilute it in some what's called buffer. It's just like a dilution liquid, and the cartridge runs in 15 minutes, and you get the results. So we're already doing tests in our lab. We have a 7,000 square foot lab that we built. The team that works on the hardware is about 15 people. We're funded by Khosla Ventures and Y Combinator. Has been funding, I think, startups for a long time. Actually, predecessor to our tech, which is like lab to use this type of sense. So cheaper in the and yeah, we're about a year away from actually, maybe a little bit sooner, but that's our timeline right now, that we're like our conservative timeline for giving these devices to users. So we're going to start what's called an IRB study. It's basically like a study where you consent, okay, I'm going to be an educational device, where you'll be able to, you take your quarterly test with Quantify, which is the standard blood panel that we discussed, and then you take more frequent tests for the markers that you're out of range on. So if you're out of CRP inflammation, you cartridge and take that every week and actually optimize around. So yeah, that Quantify start doing that in about 6 months, year, and then so the for tier ship, we put a waiting list.
Mhm. Wonderful. I have signed up to that wait list. So, and I'm getting the test. So next time we do an Instagram live, we can go over my report next time.
Yeah, we into that thing for.
Okay, cool. I know we kind of ran over time, but thank you so much for joining and tell us about Quantify. So for anyone who's watching, check out the post promoting this Instagram live, because you can get 25% off of your first purchase by using a code million-marker at checkout. So check that out. And also be sure to follow Quantify at getquantify. So thank you, Mike, for sharing. And we're gonna have to invite you back to talk about my report and to talk about Quantify Plus.
Us, thanks.
Okay.